So now let's talk about what's been happening today then, with supposedly maybe a current war taking place possibly?
Yeah, look, I since in 1981, I organized one of the biggest protests against a guy called Meir Kahane, who was a rabid Zionist. And when I first came to Boston, what's occurring today is that America is on the wrong side of history. And when you actually look at it in a very rational way, and you look at what this country was about, the only conclusion that I come to is we're on the wrong side and we should send military aid to Palestine and we have to defeat Zionism. That's the only conclusion. I'm probably the only presidential candidate who has the courage to say that. No other viable presidential candidate wants to talk about what Zionism is. But if I were president of the United States right now, I would be sending military aid to the Palestinians. It's time we arm the Palestinians to defeat Zionism. And we can talk about, it's a pretty powerful statement I'm saying, but we need to understand what is Zionism and why America is on the wrong side.
So give me a short description of Zionism. What is it?
The simple sentence that I've come up with is Zionism is racism / anti-Semitism in the service of global imperialism, which wants to maximize power, profit, and control. Zionism has nothing to do with Judaism, and Jews within Israel know this. And many of the Israeli Jews within Israel, there was a civil war about to take place over the last 2 weeks before this stuff that Netanyahu, who's Satan incarnate, started. So many Jews throughout the world can separate Zionism from Judaism. But American Christian Zionists, who have been made very stupid, don't even understand this difference. And they're being manipulated by U.S. Zionist politicians to fund the genocide of a people whose land was actually taken away from them. But Zionism is racism. It is a political ideology that was manufactured by a guy called Theodore Herzl in Europe in the 1800s to essentially mislead the European Jews there who actually wanted to fight in Europe the forces of discrimination. In fact, there were many Jews who were fighters, trade union leaders against Hitler. And Hitler wiped out those guys, and the Zionists actually collaborated with the Nazis to butcher Jews in Europe. And so Americans are so fucking stupid, sorry my language, because of the educational system. They think Zionism is Judaism, but it isn't. And you do not have to be Jewish to be a Zionist, period.
So who's the fault of us today not knowing what the true meaning of Zionism is?
That's a good question. Great question. We all know it really goes back, if you want to really put a date on it, remember 1948 is when Israel was created by literally the thievery of the land of the Palestinians. And starting from 1948 to the consolidation of the Department of Education, which began in 1970, a plan was put forward to spread to all public education that as though the Zionists were the victims and the Palestinians were some less than human, quote unquote, animals. And that was deliberately done by U.S. Zionists who had seized control not only of the educational system, but also the financial system in this country. So this was deliberately done. And I'm the only one for 40 years of my life who's been not only fighting Zionism at a deep level, but also been educating people. Not one United States presidential candidate except me will talk about this because they're all beholden to Zionism. No presidential candidate can get elected unless they suck up to Zionism. And that's why the American working people are now slaves to Zionism and the financial system that Zionists created.
So when you talk about Zionism too, and almost like the changing of history, as far as like African Americans in the books and colleges and everything, not putting the bad reality of life in there, it's moving it off.
Well, yeah, it's even worse than that. It is absolutely changing history, like the actually simplicity of it, making it quote unquote complicated. Anthony, whenever you hear people say, it's a much more complicated question. No, it isn't. It's not complicated. Palestine, you go look at maps all the way going back to the late 1600s. It says Palestine. There's no Israel there. These people were imported in by British imperialism or British colonialism. In fact, in the Sixth Zionist Conference, the number one choice was Uganda. Uganda was going to be the homeland for the quote-unquote European Jews. It was not Palestine. And there was a British in an agreement in the Balfour Declaration. And you can see the letter that was sent to Lord Rothschild. It's out there. Everyone can do a little bit of research. Palestinians were Arab Muslims and Arab Jews. There were lots and lots of dark-skinned Arab Jews. The European Zionists who came there discriminated against those people. And even still today, if you're a non-Ashkenazi Jew, you're treated much less. But the bottom line is this, to your point, Anthony, that the Zionist scholars who were in most of academia, they're like the scribes. They're rewriting history all day long, whether it be the invention of email, whether it be Zionism, whether it be African history, because Zionism is racism. It's about one group of people being the chosen people and all the rest of us being dirt. That's what it's about. It's the ultimate form of racism.
So what do you think about, since this war has happened, that you have some people that are siding with it and other people that aren't, that are going to Harvard and saying, yay for Hamas?
Actually, they didn't say yay for Hamas. Clear. Israel is the organization, and Mossad specifically created Hamas. This is
Okay.
very well documented. So these satanic forces, what they always do is they create their opposition. They were secular forces in Israel for many years, secular forces many years who wanted to fight Zionism. But it would have been too reasonable, right? They would have appeared very rational. Remember, Mossad's motto is, "It is through deception we win war. It is through deception we win war." That is their slogan.
Isn't this what we're going through now? Isn't this what we're going through now? How much of this too is people's perception as far as the media and the internet is concerned in America?
I don't even think we know what's real on the ground. The future is offline. I would probably say many Americans recognize something is really wrong here. And it's not, you could take a poll, as Anthony, and make it whatever way you want, because you just pay the pollsters off. All of these people are just driven by money, man. They have no regard for values, for the concept of good versus evil. You give them money and they'll do whatever the hell you want. And I'm telling you this from having been at the highest levels of academia, government, etc. These people are evil people. What we're witnessing before ourselves, unfortunately, I have to start using these words. It is good versus evil. And if you look at someone like Netanyahu, he's Satan incarnate. This guy is absolutely satanic.
If you were president now and this happened, what would you do?
Oh, I would, first of all, cut all military aid to Israel. I would arm the Palestinians. We're on the wrong side of history. If the founders of the country were here, people like Jefferson and Washington, they would be saying, what the hell are we doing? We're on the wrong side. This is stolen land. We should arm the Palestinians. We send military aid, economic aid. We send missiles to this little small set of Zionists who have no regard even for America. And by the way, Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State of the United States, is an Israeli citizen. Okay. So our Secretary of State is an Israeli citizen. The head of Homeland Security is an Israeli citizen. You go down the list, the first gentleman, which is Kamala Harris's husband, is an Israeli citizen. What are we running here? Are we running Israel? Or are we running America? So if you look at it, it is, the Zionists are very clever. If you look right now, Anthony, and if you go back to 2008, I want to give you 3 data points: 2008, 2020, and 2023. Actually, 2021 too. In 2008, the economy had crashed. Remember, that was a banking failure. These are the Zionists who run the banks. And who came to rescue? They should have been all wiped out if you truly followed a fair game. If you and I ran a business and we went bankrupt, no one's going to come to help us. But Barack Obama, who claimed he was for black people, actually was a tool of Zionism, right? He completely printed $8.1 trillion and he saved the Zionists on Wall Street. They should have all gone bankrupt. So that was a serious crisis that never got resolved. And then in 2019 and 2020, hundreds of millions of people all over the world were protesting corruption and the power. And again, in 2019, 2020, the economy was headed for another crash. So they created a thing called the pandemic as a fake crisis, deception, and we printed another $8 trillion in one term. That's what Trump did. And boom, the stock market was going like this and it goes like that. And now we have another impending crisis. They know the stock market is basically, it's like putting a pencil on the tip of a table. It's completely unstable. So they know it too is going to crash. So they tried Ukraine. Then they put out there they're going to try another pandemic, but people have gotten smart. But right now they're going to start this war. And that's where Netanyahu was about to be thrown out of power by Israelis. So it was a symbiotic relationship between him and U.S. Zionists, who were one, say, we're going to help you out. We're going to support you creating this war, right? And in return, you're going to give us a crisis that we need. Zionism needs, that the Zionists on Wall Street, so they can once again print money as the economy crashes and get themselves out of it. That's what this is about. You got to follow the money.
It's interesting because I know now Obama's, a lot of people are talking about that incident, and you probably agree with me. Do you think circumstances involving this country in a moment of crisis, they can do things to take their mind? It's like a bait and switch. You're worried about this, but then something else comes up with the Wall Street thing, with the war here, with the COVID thing. You think everything is orchestrated pretty much?
Well, let me just repeat what Mossad, by the way, Mossad, MI6, the CIA work very closely together. Think about what Mossad's slogan is. The slogan is, through deception, thou shalt win war. Okay? By the way, Satan, the devil, tells you to your face how he's going to behave. And people say, well, did he really say that? No, that's what he said. It's very clearly written in black and white that Mossad's, which is, by the way, to people who don't know, they are the intelligence agency of Israel. Their slogan is, through deception, thou shalt win war. Through deception, thou shalt win war. So when they're telling you that, you better be ready to understand what is truth and what is lies. We're going to go back to being independent. So yes, our campaign, Shiva numeral 4president.com, is a campaign. Our slogan slogan is declare your independence, which Kennedy has stolen that because the Zionists have realized that they need Kennedy to fill the vacuum to manipulate people, right? So they're going to run him as an independent against me. But yeah, we're running as independents.
So with that, the backdoor thing with Twitter and everything, which you've talked about, Donald Trump's election, was it stolen?
Let me put it to you this way. It's not Donald Trump's election was stolen. It's all of these elections are selections. If Donald Trump's election was stolen, what we have to recognize is why was he put in power? It leads to a much more fundamental question. So all the Trump tards who don't understand this is saying, oh my God, yeah. So I've shown that elections are selections of the United States. The work I did on signature verification, the work I did on the ballot image. There are fundamental issues, Anthony, that can be used to manipulate these elections. That's on election day. But the real election fraud comes 2 to 3 years before all of the elections take place, which is who do you even decide who gets visibility on mainstream media? The elections are selected by who you choose to give visibility. By the time they come to election day, they're just doing fine tweaks. It's like a watchmaker. He's just doing fine little tweaks at the end to make sure everything works, right? But what parts he put into play, who he puts on the stage are all decided. That is the election fraud. So the issue is, why was Trump put into power? So if you believe elections are selections, which they are, why was Trump selected the first time? And then the second time, why was he not selected? Why was Obama selected? If you go back to 2000, the broad mass of blacks, whites, brown people hated the Bushes. So they needed to renew people's trust in this thing called government. So they found this black guy, Obama, the big message, hope. He was back-ended by one of the wealthiest families in Chicago called the Pritzkers. So overnight, this one-term senator is made a hero overnight. He shoved down people's throat. In fact, 60% of people who voted for Trump in 2016 voted for Obama. Okay, very important to understand. So Obama is selected. He gets to run the country. He claimed he was going to go after the bankers, etc. But he was a perfect face that they needed to act like he was going to go to the bankers. So people, we let down our arms. And what did he do? He saved all the bankers in 2000. Right. That's what he did. So now you have poor white working class people. 57% of white people voted for Obama. Now they need a new theater character. So they find this guy, Donald Trump, who's a massively failed businessman, who's a doofus. And I've had multiple meetings with Trump. Trump's balance sheet, if people know to study the balance sheet, he had $1 billion in assets, $2.5 billion in debt. You're not running a good business. Negative $1.5 billion. That's your equity. So the bottom line is they found this guy who owes a lot of money, who's been bailed out by the Zionists. And anyone can go do their own research. Everything I'm saying is backed up by actual data. Trump was backed up by Zionists. Then he brings into the White House his Zionist son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who goes to the Arab Zionists, the Saudis, and gets a $2 billion loan for himself, an interest-free loan on the backs of the American people. So Trump was also selected. So the issue is, as I've shown with my work, elections are selections. They can manipulate the election on election day, but they can also manipulate who gets visibility, which is what they're doing right now.
And you got the Democratic Party, you got Biden up here, and you got Williamson way down there. And my thing is, through all of that, there hasn't been any other viable candidates that want to run for president.
All of these people go to the same clubs. They hang out at the same things. Marianne Williamson is also a bloody idiot. I remember having dinner with her when Trump was running, and she was profusely defending Hillary Clinton at that dinner. So she just has this shtick where she acts like she's some new age idiot, but she's a bloody idiot. She's part of them. She loves the Clintons, and they're all part of anything she does to run is actually just for publicity, right? Maybe she's going to sell some more of her books, but it's not a real campaign.
The more I see political things, people are sold out. To find honest people that you think are really honest, that's hard to find, because you're not selling a book or anything, right? Because everybody comes on these shows, they're always selling something. So we'll put it out there now. Are you pretty much selling anything?
Yeah, I'm selling something. It's called human liberation. So what I'm selling is, I realize that to me, this is an extension of what I've been doing since I was a 4-year-old kid, Anthony, right? I grew up in the caste system of India. The caste system is racism on steroids. It's openly said that if you're born into this family, all you have to be is a carpenter. You have to just be a dust, or you have to pick coconuts. It's called the caste system. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. So the caste system I was brought into and I endured was that we were supposed to be coconut pickers all day long. My parents broke out of that and then made it to the United States. They're very extraordinary people. So as a 4-year-old kid, when I witnessed this caste system, got very enraged and wanted to understand how you liberate people. I studied since 4 to the age of 20. I probably studied every book on left wing, right wing, all kinds of revolutionary leaders. I studied revolution. When I came to MIT, which was a very weird way I made it there, I studied systems science, right? I wanted to understand how systems work. So for 30 years, I studied systems. And in 2007 is when I was able to interconnect the world of systems from the Eastern world to the Western world and realize that there's a fundamental science that you can understand every system in the universe. And without that understanding, we as people are never going to be able to liberate ourselves, because the elites actually understand that system science. I used to teach it at MIT. George Soros, all the elites understand system science. So I decided that the only way, or so to me, this has been a long journey. How do we shatter the swarm, as I call it? How do we actually deliver truth, freedom, and health to people? So that resulted in my decision that the only way the world can change is not through top-down leaders, that each one of us has to be a catalyst so each person can become a leader if they want to in their local communities. Because you have one leader, he gets executed if he becomes a threat, like Malcolm X. What we have to do is we have to teach people how these systems work, how the deception works, and what one individual can do to raise their consciousness. So that's what I'm selling, if anything. So it's not selling, because you'll find me on the streets handing out flyers. I've been doing that since 1980. So the issue is that's what we need to do. That's what I'm selling. My run for president is an extension of what I've been doing on the ground for 40 years of my life. And I recognize that the only way someone like me could get ever elected president is by a movement. It is movements that change the world.